Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Cosmic Culture, the channel where we talk all things major movie and television news, theories, breakdowns, and much more. I'm your host, Chris, and last night during Ms. Marvel, the finale, we got some of the biggest news, the biggest revelations, the biggest ideas that have come to us in Phase 4, in the entirety of Phase 4. You know, we're very excited for a few new things, and that would be the purchasing of the Fox characters, namely the Fantastic Four and the X-Men/Mutants. Now, we've seen the Fantastic Four, we've seen some X-Men, we've seen some Inhumans, we've seen a few different characters, and that's all thanks to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But the inclusion of those characters was almost irrelevant since A, they died almost immediately, and B, they existed in a different universe outside what we're familiar with as the Sacred Timeline. Well, last night we have our first mention of these characters entering the MCU as the name mutation, which is a very specific and picked word, was dropped to describe the current status of Kamala Khan, or Ms. Marvel's, genes. Now, we're going to talk about what this means as we're moving forward into Phase 5 and 6 for the MCU, but this is without a doubt something to get very excited about. So, let's get into it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our other major movie and television news uploads. As well, you can check me out on my other socials, Instagram at Chris M. Rosser and Twitter at TheCultureChris. Links to both of those are in the description down below. So here's the clip. It's specifically coming from the finale last night. It's what Bruno had to say. It comes at the very end of the finale of the series. Here it is.
Kamala, there's something different in your genes. Like a mutation.
Now, for this specific moment, there's a lot of different things that we need to cover and we need to understand. So if you're not necessarily familiar with Ms. Marvel, with mutants and humans, all of the kind of story behind, I'm going to simplify it and summarize it as best I can for you. For starters, Ms. Marvel, traditionally and in the comics, is an Inhuman, which isn't necessarily different from a mutant, except for they have to have their powers activated, usually by something referred to as a Terrigen Mist. Now, if you watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or have read the comics, you would be familiar with this process where the mist kind of hits them and this activates their mutated genes. It's not usually referred to as a mutated gene because that's a whole different class. That's the mutants. Mutants are born with this gene, and sometimes different things will cause it to come out. Sometimes it will naturally just be there and exist, or sometimes some kind of stressful situation will cause these abilities to be exposed. It doesn't require any type of mist or any type of turning on the abilities outside of discovering if that gene is there and then it kind of revealing itself. So that's really the main difference. The abilities that Inhumans have or that mutants have generally kind of fall under the same possible scope of understanding. So other than that exact mist kind of activating the powers, mutants and Inhumans very similar. Now keep that in mind. That is a simplified idea. I'm sure there are a lot of very comic book read and entertaining the idea that they're very different, but for the most part, and certainly for the purposes of the MCU, those are the big differences between Inhumans and mutants. What we seem to be having here is either a single character has been switched over from an Inhuman to a mutant, with the term mutation being thrown out there. He easily could have said there's something inhuman about you, but he chose to say mutant. Now, he didn't write the script. The script was written, but it is very specific wordage. Keep that in mind. So with the word mutation being thrown at Ms. Marvel, who Kevin Feige has already said they've chosen to change her origin story from the comics a little bit in the MCU, and that she wasn't going to be an Inhuman. A lot of us thinking, well, the big reveal here at the end is that she is an Inhuman after all. Well, it turns out she might be a mutant. But this comes with several other questions, like, are there others? Is this the first mutant that's been discovered in this universe? Does Professor X or some other type of well-known X-Men character have a whole training camp for mutants and she's going to be introduced to that later on? Or are mutants just non-existent so far in the MCU? And we're going to find out how that gene has been introduced, whether it was from Thanos' snap or from the emergence that has caused genetic DNA to be changed. However they plan on explaining that in the MCU. Hopefully we'll be getting some answers for that in upcoming projects. But moving on past that, another question you might have is, are Inhumans going to exist in the MCU one day? And I think there's a heavy possibility, and you may or may not like this, that they're going to merge the idea of Inhumans and X-Men for the MCU. Well, at the very least, for our universe. For the 616 part, as was described in Multiverse of Madness, the sacred timeline of our universe. Because we know Inhumans and mutants existed in the other universe where the Illuminati were from, because they introduced Black Bolt as king of the Inhumans and keeper of the Terrigen Mist. So they did exist, and that fact that Miss Marvel is possibly a mutant based on the wordage that they gave us here doesn't mean that Inhumans can't or won't exist in the MCU, just that her specifically might be kicking off the idea of mutants and X-Men. I think between the Inhumans and the mutants are definitely more well known, they're more popular, people are more excited for them joining the MCU. Now that doesn't mean you specifically, I just mean the general populace. Maybe you absolutely love Inhumans and their storylines and a few of their characters, but most people are more familiar with the X-Men. So this means more money for Disney to exploit, and more likely that they're going to try to bring the mutants to the MCU first, or definitely over and instead of the Inhumans. So if you only had to get one, you're getting mutants, and if you only had to get one now, it's also going to be mutants. That's just how money talks. So, mutants entering the MCU, where can we expect this to be expounded on? Because it doesn't seem like the Marvels are really going to be talking about or covering the X-Men or the mutants, but now that it's been mentioned and thrown into it, we have and need to ask ourselves, where are the others? Because there will not just be one mutant in the all eternity of the MCU, of this timeline. There will be several others. Several who we are excited for. Gambit, Professor X, Cyclops, Wolverine, Storm. So many different characters who I know you guys just cannot wait. Cannot wait to have introduced. This is the beginning. And with San Diego Comic-Con just around the corner, and with this finale of Miss Marvel being the final project that we will be seeing before those announcements, it couldn't be more set up for them to go in there, Kevin Feige to stare at all of us and say, alright guys, we're getting mutants. Here's where you're going to see them. Here's a mutant series, here's a project, here's a Cyclone individual project, a Professor X individual project. Let's have some fun. All of that hopefully can and will be revealed to us at San Diego Comic-Con. I think we're ready. I think it's time for all of these Phase 4 boxes to start connecting as we reach into Phase 5. She-Hulk has a lot of high expectations for some of the explanation as to what is going on in the MCU right now. As we have had a lot of solo and individual projects, that explanation is starting to be demanded by fans. And I think probably it's finally time that these Disney Plus shows carry their weight in the MCU by not just introducing characters and telling their story, but by adding characters and further pushing the plot of the MCU. So hopefully with She-Hulk we'll see something like that as well. We could also expect maybe to see some Black Panther news. I Am Groot's coming out just around the corner. A Halloween special hopefully we'll get some information for. Lots of fun stuff that could come our way at San Diego Comic-Con. But let me know a few things, because I gotta know and I gotta ask. Are you excited for the mutants? Are you okay with them potentially replacing Inhumans with mutants and making them one group? And do you think that this actually is the beginning of the mutants, or are Marvel just messing with us? Because they really enjoy doing that nowadays. Let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, thank you to everybody who watched to the very end of the video. If you found it helpful, useful, or entertaining, consider subscribing and turning on that notification bell. And I'll be sure to catch all of you guys in the next one right here on Cosmic Culture.